everybody. Thanks for hanging out on What Could Go Wrong Live this week. What already did go wrong live this week was LinkedIn Live hates me. So we're streaming on Twitch and Facebook today, and I've never not streamed on LinkedIn. So welcome to that party. Thanks for whoever's hanging out from wherever you're hanging out. Today, Teacher Tom is hanging out with us, and we're going to talk about the future of education and why we're not preparing learners for the future of education. So I'm going to bring Tom in and let him introduce himself. What's up, Tom?
Hi, Chelsea.
How are you?
I'm doing great. All things considered.
All things considered, right? I mean, thanks for coming to hang out on a show called What Could Go Wrong, because that's always questionable.
No, I think that's just honesty, right?
That's true. That's accurate. I mean, after teaching early education for as long as I did and then directing it, I mean, that was kind of my role, right? Was to mitigate what could go wrong.
Yeah. Oh, no. I mean, that's all any of us do. We get up in the morning and we fix all the things that went wrong, and we go to bed at night and we wake up and do it again.
That's right. All over again. Well, so I came across you on LinkedIn because you post from your blog, and your blog is always kind of like controversial, right? Throwing out some big topics in there and having some interesting perspectives. So I messaged you and I was like, how do we talk about these things on What Could Go Wrong? Do you want to do that? And sometimes when I ask people, do you want to come on a show called What Could Go Wrong? They're like, but you were like, yeah, totally, let's do it. So that was perfect.
Yeah, well, I mean, from where I sit, nothing I've ever written is controversial.
Well, I mean, and that's why you're awesome and why you're here. So the one that I had talked about specifically with you was why we're not preparing learners for the future, right? Future jobs. We're not preparing learners for future jobs was that. And so I actually took that yesterday and posted it on LinkedIn. So the question was, should we be preparing learners for the jobs of tomorrow? Now, I had over 12,000 views on the post and 245 votes, with 81% saying yes, we should. And to clarify, when I posted this, I said, I do not agree with this. What do you think? And I was thinking maybe some people will just agree because I agree, right? Because we're friends and they're going to go with it. But it was an overwhelming yes, we should be doing this. Only 19% live in the same boat of no, we shouldn't be preparing learners for the future. And so before we kind of dig into that, I wanted to ask you a question. I have a thing that I say all the time, that the future of education is we don't know the future of education. And you were like, oh, I do. So I'd love for you to kind of tell us what the future of education is.
I used to agree with you up until the pandemic. And now when I'm watching how people are scrambling like mad to get back to absolutely exactly the same thing we've been doing forever. Right. Without any learning having taken place, it appears to me. It just seems like it's very clear to me that most people consider schools as a convenient, free babysitting service so they can get about their lives and do their job. And it's very obvious to me that we've had an opportunity here to really, and maybe we still will, to transform at least some pieces of education. Because I don't think anybody can be fully happy with what we do in education right now. Everybody knows that we could be doing a better job of it. And I just want to clarify one thing that you said, and maybe you didn't mean it this way. I think we absolutely are preparing children for the future. We just aren't preparing them for the jobs of the future. Correct. Yes. No.
Yep. For the jobs of tomorrow was my specific question. Was should we prepare learners for the jobs of tomorrow was that. So this is like strictly vocation based. So before we dig into that, who are you? Why are you here?
Well, I'm here because I've been a preschool teacher for more than 20 years here in Seattle, Washington. I work, and I've always worked in a cooperative school. And for those that don't know what a cooperative school is, a cooperative is a model of education. It can be we have them all the way up through elementary school. Here in Seattle. And a cooperative school is a school that is owned and operated by the parents who enroll their children in the school. And this is a legal entity, right? So the parents, we have, like 85 families in our school, and those 85 families equally own the school. And so the teachers, so me and the couple other teachers, we are the only paid employees. And the parents do everything else that goes into making a school operate, from the administrative work to the financial planning to the maintenance and the custodial work. And so we have this great benefit. So we have this. So in a very real sense, I have 85 bosses. I have an upside down corporate pyramid, right? And they are, in a very real sense, they hire me, they fire me, they evaluate me. At the same time, on a day-to-day basis, every family owes me an adult once a week who will come in the classroom and work with me as an assistant teacher. So I'm working, on a day-to-day basis, I supervise these parents. And on a big picture basis, they're my supervisors, and it's a beautiful model. And I think any business would benefit from this kind of model, because the customers are also the owners, are also the employees, right? And then also their children are the ones that are the real benefiters. Yeah. And so the parents are always, so we never have budget issues, for example, because if parents really want something for their kids, they pony up. And if they don't want it for kids, they don't pony up. And it's actually really, I can't imagine how people work any other way. And very often I'll be in a classroom with 20 kids, and I might have as many as 8 to 10 adults in the room with me working.
Wow.
And so I always say we don't just enroll children, we enroll entire families in our school.
Yeah. I love that. So I've never actually been able to participate in that model of school, but I have friends in other areas of the country who have participated in that type of model. And I've only ever heard amazing things about it. The closest thing that I've seen hands-on and touched here is like a homeschool co-op, where they kind of do something similar, but just on like electives kind of basis, and it's run by the parents and that kind of thing, but it's not a full school.
Yeah, the original co-op models, I mean, most of them, not our school, but a lot of schools in our system. We have about 45 schools in our system that operate out of North Seattle College. The original schools were started in the 1940s. So it's been around for a long time. And there's co-ops that go back until the turn of the last century and things like that. And it really was originally, that's what it was. It was essentially a way for, because everybody was moving to the suburbs, and they were moving out of the cities, they're moving out to the suburbs. And frankly, it was mostly women who felt trapped. They felt trapped at home in these places. They didn't have their cities anymore where they could go out and just see their neighbors. And so that's what they started doing with their preschoolers, is they started just getting together and they called it a school, and and it has grown into now what it is. I mean, here in the Northwest and Seattle area, I'm going to guess we have 250 cooperative preschools. Wow. They're really, it's a going model.
Yeah, I love that. I can't think of any like in my immediate world here that function that way. And I would love to see more of that come into the area where I am and just continue to grow across the country. Because like you said, it is what it's called. Everybody's working in a cooperative manner for the focus of the children.
And the part about this, people often say, well, yeah, you must have privileged families, right? Because everybody's got to have a job. 20% of our families are on scholarship. And this means that the families decide they're going to come around and pay for them. Our tuitions are like $200 a month. So it's not like we're actually a very inexpensive model. But what you pay for is with your time and your attention and your commitment to your kids. And, employers around here, many of them will give you, morning off to go work in your kids' co-op. Because it's such a popular model, a lot of, you run into CEOs who say, oh yeah, my kids went to co-op, and they'll, give their employees, well, sure, work a little extra on Thursday afternoon, or you go in Thursday morning, or whatever it is like that. So it isn't getting in the way of families' opportunities to earn their living.
Yeah, I love that. And it's cool to see kind of the ripple effect of school models, because positive or negative, however the school model is, it's going to have a ripple effect outward into the community and, the requirements and those types of things. So I love to see that, and how businesses are working together with schools and parents, and, just that mutual support all the way around is such a cool thing to see. So before we got on, or maybe when we already started, I don't even know anymore, but I was talking about how your blog posts always come up as kind of controversial, and you were like, none of my blog posts are controversial, which is so funny to kind of hear that. So tell me about what you like to write about. What do you usually put about?
So I started writing this blog back in 2009. And really, all I was planning to do was I don't think I'd even read a blog before then. I had worked as a writer for a long time before I got into being a teacher, and I'd taken a break while my daughter was young, and I was just sort of looking for a place to just publish stuff. And to me, all a blog was like a place online you could store your writing, so that you could tell people, hey, go read it over there if you want to read it. And I just started doing this. And so the things I started writing about were mainly just stories from the classroom. My audience, I perceived my audience to be the parents. And it was just a way for me to communicate with them and to give them a chance to, see what was happening during the day, and to get some of my thinking about what I saw happening in the classroom. But over time, I began to kind of expand what I write about. Mostly I write about what I formally call sort of a progressive play-based pedagogy. What if somebody calls my school and asks me what our program is, I'll say it's Crunchy Granola Hippie. Because that actually sells to people around here, and it works really well. But we're so for us, we're a play-based education, and so for me, play is the natural way for humans to learn. I mean, I think our research is very clear on this. When we look around at research on education, Carol Black, the writer, she has this great metaphor for it. She says most of the research we see out there is research done on children learning in schools. She says that's kind of the scientific equivalent of a marine biologist studying the orca whales at SeaWorld and then claiming they understand orcas. Because of course we know if you're going to study orcas, you study them in the wild. You don't study them in the zoo, you study them in their natural habitat. And the natural habitat for young children is playing. And so that's when we take a look at children while they're at play, we see that how powerful play is as a method for children to learn.
Yeah, and it's so interesting. Like this show and the past two shows have all ended up being about play. The one 2 weeks ago was about risky play. And I had the co-founder of Worthy, and they're a playground company. He came out and talked about risky play and the value of that. And that's kind of a controversial thing, progressive on the side there. We talked about lawnmower parenting and those types of things, and kind of got into the power of play. And then last week I had the founder from Harper's Playground, and they build inclusive playgrounds come on. And we ended up talking about the value of play. And it's just all these kind of concepts, they're always coming back to this, what I consider a completely foundational to learning is this play, right? What does play look like? How does it benefit, and all of that. And I know so much of your writing revolves around that. And the school that I directed most recently, we were Reggio Emilia inspired, and then play-based and those types of things. And it was such a valuable thing. And I remember when I took over the school, they were running a curriculum called Abeka, which is all worksheets starting at 2 years old and then through, right, all the way through. They were very much
a way to make children hate learning and hate school. We're all born learning, loving to learn, just absolutely driven, motivated to learn. And then what we do is when we decide as the adults that we know better about what they should be spending their time on and what they should, first of all, we teach them that somebody else can always tell them what to do. And is that really a value we want in a democratic society? I mean, it's crazy. And instead of giving children, at least in the early years, the opportunity for them to ask and answer their own questions rather than us always pretending like we know.
Yeah, because then they get older and they're like, wait, you didn't know that. I'm like, no, I didn't.
Well, it's not only that, but it's just like we are so boring. The things we think they have to know, they have no interest in. Da Vinci, I just did a quote from Leonardo da Vinci where he's talking about, trying to learn something without the desire is the equivalent of eating when you're not hungry. We know it's not good for you. We know you're not going to be satisfying. We know it's going to taste bad. It doesn't matter. You could feed somebody ice cream. If they're already full, they're going to hate it. And this is what happens so often in schools when we sit here and we decide, oh yeah, well, the kids are going to need to learn this, these letters of the alphabet today. Maybe 10% of the kids are into it and they have a good day. The rest of the kids are just maybe tolerating what's going on. I mean, what a way to live life. I mean,
they're humoring you.
We start them when, we're starting them now when they're younger than 2 years old, and we expect them to be in school till they're 18 at least. if not longer. And if they're spending all the time only doing what other people are telling them to do, that's not a good start to life.
Yeah, right. I mean, this whole concept, which is not new, but it's being presented as this new concept of curiosity-based learning, right? Which is not new, but it's like, look at this new progressive style of learning. We do curiosity-based, and we're following the learner and learner-led and all those types of these buzzwords that are being thrown around.
Go back and look at some of the names we all know in early childhood. John Dewey, Jean Piaget, Maria Montessori, Rudolf Steiner, Lev Vygotsky, all of them. And this is over 100 years ago when they were doing this work.
Yeah,
and they were all saying we need to free the children up to play. Reggio Emilia, you mentioned the Waldorf model. All those are based on this concept that children should be directing their own learning, self-directed learning. But you can go back before that. You can go back and hear Plato talking about the importance of play and how children need to be playing. Yeah. And in fact, if you look at human history, you think of it as a 12-hour clock. For 11 hours, 59 minutes, and 30 seconds of that time, we were hunter-gatherers. There were no schools. There were no schools. The children, what did they do? They played. What did they play at? Hunting and gathering, because that's what they perceived was the important things in their lives. So this idea, this kind of academic-based education, the stuff we're doing now, this is brand new stuff. It emerged right alongside as part of the Industrial Revolution. Back then, the jobs of tomorrow. Let's get to that. Back then, in the Industrial Revolution, the thinkers, the big important people in the world, the policymakers. Well, sure, everybody's going to move off the farms. They're all going to move into the cities, and they're going to have to take these mind-numbing, repetitive jobs on the assembly line. Putting the widget on over and over again. We need to prepare the children for the jobs of tomorrow. So they set up schools, which basically are the same kind of schools we have now, where we, as Ken Robinson talks about, where we organize the kids by manufacture date, and then we send them down this assembly line of education like there's these empty vessels, incomplete humans, and we're going to fill them up a little bit more and a little bit more. They get down here at the end, and then finally, we've manufactured them and they're done. Because we have to get them ready for these jobs of tomorrow, these mind-numbing, repetitive jobs. So we made mind-numbing, repetitive schools where there was a lot of rote learning. And look what happened. They were wrong about the jobs of tomorrow. Everybody didn't go work there. Same thing happened to me when I was in high school. I remember sitting down with my high school guidance counselor as I was considering university. And she was talking about all these careers I might consider. Not a single one of those careers exists today. I would be my daughter. She's 25 years old, 24 years old, and the jobs that she's applying for didn't exist when she was in preschool. So the people who talked about getting them ready for jobs of tomorrow, when somebody says we have to get children ready for the jobs of tomorrow, they're blowing smoke. They don't have any idea what the jobs are. Nobody does. The jobs that our kids are going to be applying for in 20 years, they don't exist now. We can't even conceive of what they are. What you and I are doing right now, the fact that you could have a job, hosting an online, I don't know, broadcast, it wouldn't even be in somebody's brain to think that you could be doing that. So the idea that we have to get them vocational training at earlier and earlier ages is crazy. The proper career aspiration for a 5-year-old is princess, right? The proper career aspiration. It should be cowboy, right?
Right.
And the kids that we're teaching now, not only are they not going to fill the jobs we imagine tomorrow, they're going to be the ones inventing those jobs.
Right.
Michael Hassler here, one of your commenters here, critical thinking and empathy. Those are the skills that are going to get us through life. Those are the valuable skills. If you ask yourself, what's the purpose of education? Right? We live in this country, right? We're talking about the US right now. So I know you might have some Australian and other visitors. It also counts in Australia. It counts in most of Europe. It counts in most of the world. If we lived in a theocracy, right? The religious base, obviously the purpose of schools would be religious training, right?
Right.
If we lived in some other kind of dictatorship, the idea we would have to have some kind of, ideology the children we need to buy into. So that's obvious what schools would be for. But we purport to live in a democracy, right? Democratic society, self-governing. So, when you listen to our policymakers, this is why I'm not surprised at the answers you got in your survey about this.
Yeah.
Is because when you listen to our policymakers, and I'm talking everybody from Bernie Sanders to Donald Trump and everybody in between, they all get it wrong. Every single one of them, if they even bother to talk about children, they'll talk about schools. And if they talk about schools, they always link it to the economy. They always like these jobs are torn. We need to out-educate the Chinese. I'll never forget this hand, right? This is the hand they used to. We're going to out-educate the Chinese. You know, Barack Obama did it. I've also seen George Bush Jr. do it too. You know, they do this. We're going to out-educate the Chinese as if it's some kind of competition.
Yeah.
Vocational training is our reason. The reason we have schools, the reason we need an educated population is because we are a democratic society. And whether or not we achieve it that's a matter for debate. But I think we all value self-governance.
Yeah.
The purpose of education in a self-governing society, the purpose is so that we will have citizens capable of taking their role in self-governance. It's not so they'll get jobs. Because if it's all about jobs, we might as well turn it over to the corporations to train their own damn workers because, honestly, right? Why are taxpayers paying for job training? That doesn't make sense. No, we need it. We need self-governance, right? And so here we go. So what are the skills? And the skills required to be a good citizen are in many cases the exact opposite of the skills required to do well in a corporate job. I mean, I'm thinking right now about obedience.
Yeah.
Right? If you're in the classic, and I showed you my upside down pyramid, the classic corporate hierarchy, it's like this. I mean, it really could be described as a dictatorship set up in the middle of our democracy. And when the CEO says something, if you decide you're not going to do it, you're out. That's called insubordination. You're out of there.
Yeah.
But in a democracy, I don't want obedient people. I want people who think for themselves. Because somebody who follows obedience is looking for somebody else to do their thinking for them. And they're dangerous to themselves and they're dangerous to the rest of us because that means they're really easy to influence by other people.
Right.
And on the same side, if you've grown up in an environment where it's all about obedience and doing what you're told, well, then if you find yourself in a situation where somebody's not telling you what to do,
then what?
Your conclusion is, I guess I get to boss these people around.
Right.
And it's or I don't know what to do. Those are the two options.
Yeah.
Well, and a good citizen is a critical thinker. A good citizen is someone who thinks for him or herself. A good citizen asks a lot of questions. A good citizen is someone who challenges authority, who questions authority. And I invite people, think about that. Think about that in your school environment. Do the children know? They should know that they have not just the right, but the responsibility to challenge your authority. Because that's what I tell parents when they come. This is why this is controversial, because I live in this bubble, right? I tell the parents when they come and they enroll their children in our school at that fall orientation, I tell them, I'm going to be teaching your children to question your authority. And they always laugh, right?
Yeah.
They're already doing that. And I say, good. That's what they should be doing. I mean, that's why on the first day, so I get kids from 2 to 5 years old. When those 2-year-olds show up, and they've usually they've not even met me before, I always make sure my box of plastic farm animals is there.
Yeah.
And when they come in, I take out the pig, and I say, the pig says moo. Right? And most of them laugh. Yeah, because they know the pig doesn't say moo. They say, no, the cow says moo. The pig says like, I get a lot of them that just look at me like I'm crazy, like this. Or look at their mom, like, you're going to leave me with this.
Right. Yeah.
I was like, because I want them to listen to what I say. And if what I say doesn't match what they already know about the world, I want them to know, again, it's not just their right, but their responsibility to call me on it.
Yeah.
And so
I love that.
Teach them to do this because that's how I want them to treat every authority figure. They don't have to be jerks about it.
Right.
I mean, we think questioning authority is all about being a jerk. You don't have to be a jerk. They're laughing. They're joking with me. They'll even say to me, "You're joking. You don't think that's true." And I want them to call me on it because those are the kind of citizens I want. A good citizen is someone who knows they need to stand up for their beliefs, even when those around them disagree.
Yeah.
And that's, again, think about it in our adult life. It's hard to do right now.
Yeah, it is.
Right? It's really hard in groups of people. We need people who are better at it, and we need to become people who are better at listening. the other people. I mean, I love telling this story. You know, in my classroom, the way this shows up, it shows up every year at Easter, right after Easter, right? We come back to class. Somebody always raises their hand. Says, Teacher Tom, the Easter bunny came to my house and laid eggs. There's always another kid who says, no, bunnies don't lay eggs. Chickens lay eggs. And then the bunny gets the eggs from the chickens and brings, no, the bunny lays, that's the chicken. That, you know, this is a bad faith, right? So they get into these heated debates over the Easter bunny. You know, there's always at least one Jewish kid saying, your parents are lying to you. You know? these incredible back and forth. And, you know, it doesn't have to be about Easter, but it's about all kinds of things. But to me, that's what, for me in preschool, that's what our circle times are about. We talk about important issues like Easter bunny or if grandma's or whatever the kids are on the kids' minds. And we end up in these amazing, I mean, it sounds a lot like the way adults argue, right? Because I don't think nobody changes their minds.
Right. Yeah.
Nobody changes their minds in these, but that's not the point.
Right.
The point isn't to persuade one. The point is that I get to hold on to my belief. In fact, I think many of these kids after these debates, they believe more firmly than they did before.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
What's changed now? What's changed is that I believe what I believe, but now I know that my friend over there believes something else, and my friend over there believes something else, and they get this big picture of who we are as a collective, as a community. Because fundamentally, isn't that what democracy is? We're trying to, it should be a big community where we talk with each other. When I talk about democracy, I'm talking about I'm not talking about voting. Voting is just that's just like the most basic thing you can do. Democracy is about having conversations about our beliefs, about talking to our neighbors over the fence. I mean, your neighbor's the best person to talk to about your beliefs because they know you and they might even like you. And you know, then you're talking to them and they go, wow, I disagree with you, but I still like you. And that's what the kids do after these heated debates, and adults have forgotten how to do this. After these heated debates that go on for at least an hour sometimes, then they all go outside and play.
Right. Yes. Right? Yeah. Yep.
And now they know, in the back of their mind, they always know, I had my beliefs, but there are other people who are part of us, that's part of our community, who think different things than I do. You know, a good citizen knows they contribute to the world in ways other than merely through the economy. I mean, it's important to be able to pull your weight and everything, but if we tie it all to the economy, it's almost as if we're trying to say, well, you know, we're here to serve the economy rather than the other way around. And I didn't see it that way. I'm not here to serve anybody's economy. I'm here to serve, the economy's here to serve all of us. It's a human invention designed to make life better for ourselves, not for us to sacrifice our lives, slaving away, saving up our dollars, so someday then we can retire and have 10 years of stress-free life. We're in the hospital. That's okay.
Of a real life once you retire.
So for me, that's what I mean when I say I'm not preparing children for the jobs of tomorrow, because one, we have no idea what they are.
Right.
The world is changing way too fast, and it always has changed way too fast. The children will invent those jobs themselves when they get there. And the most important part is that fundamentally, vocational training doesn't serve our democracy, our society, our community in the way that learning those skills of citizenship do. And those skills of citizenship, every one of them, get you fired.
Yeah, absolutely accurate. Because these are the skills, like these types of things, like asking hard questions and bringing up, progressive topics and those kinds of things. That's what I do. That's my whole platform, right? And it always comes across as like, ooh, Chelsea's doing these like edgy things. When in reality, I'm just asking questions, right? I don't go into it with that. And I think the ability to see that other people believe something different than you and still value that person regardless of their beliefs is life-changing. Like that ability changes everything for everyone. Well, and it's not seen enough.
Yeah, it means listening to other people. And I've learned this from children. I have not learned this from anywhere else. I've learned it from working with children.
Yes. Yeah, it's huge. So like my oldest is 11, and we've been kind of instilling this in her for the past 11 years, right? And sometimes she goes off the rails with it, but mostly she's respectful in her responses. But she is encouraged to ask questions in a respectful way. Like, can you tell me more about what you mean by that? And those types of things. And there are adults in her life who are very much like, you will respect me because I am the adult, and do not ask me that type of question. And,
right.
and that's hard. Sometimes she's like, wait, like, why? And she's having to kind of make amends with that in her head, because my statement to her is, as long as you're respectfully doing it, ask the question, like ask me, ask someone else. And she just started at a public school this year, and she'd been in small private schools and homeschool things and stuff like that. And so this is her first year in a big school. And the second day of school, something was going on, and the vice principal went over, and the way that she describes it is she punched her in the shoulder to get her attention, right? Whatever that really looked like, we're not claiming abuse, but this was the motion that was happening, right? And Phelan said, I did not like that. Like, I don't know why she felt like she needed to hit me. And I said, what was your response? And she goes, well, I mean, she's the vice principal. And I was like, and how can you respectfully state that you did not, if you want to get your attention, there's another way to do that. Right. And so we kind of walked through that and, said, all right, so if this happens again, what's a respectful way that you can respond? But I wanted her to hear what I was saying, and that you don't just have that right with people who are your peers or, whatever. You have this right, especially when it comes to your body, like to say, please, I don't like that, but is there a different way that you can get my attention other than, hitting me in the shoulder or whatever? And so it's an ongoing thing. And she was raised in that. And she's still kind of like, the vice principal.
We live in a society that really values obedience. And we think we don't, but we value it so much. And why would, if you ask most people, you said your survey showed what it does. I'd say if you ask people about, is it important for children to be obedient to adults? I think that society, generally speaking, agrees with that point of view, and I disagree. I do not value obedience in children. In fact, it worries me, because we know what we learned when we're young, we carry forward into adulthood. I think I read the other day, and he said, well, the way I see it is kids do what they're told till they're 18, and then after that, they get to do what they want. How do you
what skills?
If you haven't practiced? Suddenly. By the way, I was 18. I've known 18-year-olds, and recently, my daughter was recently 18 years old.
Yeah.
I want her to have lots of practice thinking for herself and making decisions for herself, or have a driver's license, and she can drink, and she can do all these other things.
Yeah.
Definitely want her to not be an obedient person.
Right. I was speaking at an event for educators last week before, and we're talking about building trauma-informed spaces. So essentially psychological safety. How do you create this? And I asked the question, we were talking about resilience and all those things that come in it. And I asked them, can you describe to me what resilience is? And, the ability to get over something, right? I'm like, okay, like let's dig into that a little bit more. Can you describe to me what obedience is? And they were like, well, obedience is, the ability to do what you're told. I'm like, okay, I agree with that. Do you ever think that obedience could be masquerading around as resilience? And by a child, having a hard day one day, not talking about it, and coming back the next day like nothing happened, is that a resilience or is that obedience? And they were like, and so my theory is that more often what we're viewing as resilience, we're actually seeing as obedience, because resilience is the ability to go through it, to feel the feelings, to talk about it, to process it, and then to make a plan of how to get it over it, or to how to get through it better the next time, right? To reflect on it. While obedience is just doing what you're told. And so how often is a child coming in, we're labeling them as obedient, or we're labeling them as resilient, when in reality they just kind of brushed it aside, didn't feel it, and they're looking to please you because you're looking for them to be obedient. And the room just was like,
that's brilliant, Chelsea. Thanks for sharing that with me.
But I don't know. So, that's my big thing is because I train a lot on trauma-informed psychological safety. And a lot of that comes from understanding that everyone has a different perspective. What does it look like to create a safe space? Like the conversations that you have in Circle Time. How does this feel for you? Being able to take risks in conversation, share things that might not be well received by the other person. All of that goes into psychological safety. And many times we don't recognize the way that we create that almost naturally inside of early education, because, you know, like you said, they have kind of a heated debate and then they're like, let's go play.
Right.
Right. So how do we encourage that skill? Because it's a skill that they often lose as they get older.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, society has a tendency to hammer down the nails that stick up.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, what would be the tools that we could use to continue to nourish that skill of understanding other people's different beliefs and respecting them anyway?
Are you talking about as parents?
Or as parents, as educators, either? All?
I mean, you gave a good example before, is talking to your kids about it. Being as a parent, to me, that's the most important thing. You know, I don't think we owe our children, you know, I think we owe our children the truth about the world, that life is unfair, that evil doesn't always get punished, and that goodness doesn't always get rewarded. And we tend to tell them that, and then they go through life frustrated. And really, like, using the example that you talked about, it's sort of like, yeah, that wasn't fair, that your middle school teacher, got into your space that way and treated you in a way that you didn't want to be treated. And sometimes that's going to happen. And I think, to me, we give them the honesty of that. So I think talking about the dynamic, and even because we're all fail at it sometimes. I mean, sometimes we're all cajoled into obedience, or we're grown-ups, right? I mean, the research tells us that 80% of the sentences adults say to young children are commands. So kids around all the time, and you and I are doing it, and we're trying not to.
I know.
Really see themselves as being in charge, the boss of the kids. We are conditioned to do this. We create this reality that way. So we have to take a conscious effort as individuals, as educators. One of the ways that, as an educator, that I try really hard to instill is the wrong word, to give children experience in a place where they are a peer with the other adults. And I say that all the time. I'm not their boss. I'm responsible for them. I'm responsible for their safety. I'm responsible for them, certain things that they need to do. But I'm not the boss of them. I stand on the same step they do, and then they're my colleagues, and we're colleagues together, and we're both going through a learning process. Like I said before, I learned my most important skills of being a citizen from the children I teach.
Right. I mean, it's that co-constructivism, right? How can I work alongside you?
Right. And so so to me, what I think the way we speak with children is really being conscious of the language we use with them, to find ways to speak with them that is informative, that creates space for them to think for themselves. I think is really, really important, both for parents and educators. Instead of saying to a kid, "Get in the car," which is a command, even if you say it nice, even if you say, "Get in the car, please," right? It's still a command, right? You've added the please in there as if it's like it's still out. And what you leave the child with, the child has two choices now. They can obey you or disobey you. There's no room for thinking there.
Right. Yeah.
Right? I mean, it's just they're going to have to react. And if they get in the car, then you're like, good boy. And if they don't get in the car, then we're like, you rotten kid. And, those are the only choices we give them, like 80% of the time. It's amazing they ever do what we want them to do. Much better is to say something like, it's time to go, which is a statement of fact about schedules. Adults, we know about schedules, right? So we can say something about schedules, it's time to go. And you increase the odds that the child now you've created space for them to think. And you're going to give them time, right? Because we don't necessarily react like that. And this is the other thing adults do. We expect kids to react like this. I don't react like that to anybody. I don't expect any kids to.
Yeah.
And so anyway, we say it's time to go. That way you suddenly increase the odds that they'll think, it's time to go. You know what I could do? I could go get in the car.
Yeah, you're giving them space to solve the problem with you.
Children
instead of you solving the problem for them.
We are born wanting to cooperate, wanting to be productive members of a community, whether it's our families or our classrooms or whatever community we're in. Everybody wants to be part of that community.
Right.
All are born that way. It is incredibly rare. People become defiant when they've been bossed around. I'll never forget this little boy named Aiden, who came to me a few years ago, and he had been kicked out of 2 preschools.
Oh boy.
That doesn't, I mean, that's just appalling that you'd kick a kid out.
It is. I can't even. That's a whole different podcast.
Well, and when I asked the father, his father was the main contact, and I asked his father, I said, "Oh, so what happened? What's going on?" He said, "Well, he's actually okay with the other kids, but he has a tendency to hit the adults and to scream at them, and he bites them, and he gets violent with the adults sometimes when he gets frustrated with them." And I didn't believe him, right? Because I'd never met a kid like that. I was just like, nah,
yeah.
He also, I mean, I've seen kids who hit and all that stuff, but he's hitting other kids too. Maybe you just didn't notice it. And so I was sort of in disbelief. But that first day, that boy came in class, and he was definitely, he stayed away from the grown-ups. And there was a lot of grown-ups in my room. Like I said, I think there were probably 6 or 7 in the room when he was there. And he would go to whatever part of the room had the fewest adults in it, and that's where he played. And then I had specifically got the Legos out that day because his dad said he loved Legos, and I wanted to give him something familiar to go to. This kid was 4 years old. So he went over to the Legos, and he's sitting there building, and there was an adult in that area, but he was at the far corner, as far from that adult as he could be. And sure enough, he was getting along with the other kids. He was showing off. I built the Batmobile, and he was just showing off. He was having a great time and charming the other kids. And I'm thinking, oh man, how could this kid get kicked out?
Right.
He doesn't even need me. I was just on the other side of the room. And I was just sort of, I had introduced myself, but that's it, because he had given me sort of a suspicious look at the beginning. and then
as they all do.
Yeah. Well, then it was time for us to tidy up, and I have this drum that signals it. And I said, all right, it's cleanup time. Hey, hey, hey. I started singing the song. And he just shouted at me, "I'm not going to clean up." And I said, okay. But we're going to. And so he just sat there fuming while the rest of us tidied up the classroom. And then later, then I, called him over. We're going to have a little circle time. Come on over and, have a seat. Yeah. "I'm not going to come to circle time." And I said, "That's okay. You can go read a book or something."
Yeah.
You can see this just blew his mind. It was like,
I know. He's like, wait.
Right. And so then he went over and he started, I started flipping through a book, and we're having this. And so that day, that's what happened. Then the next day, a couple of days later, it happened the same way. And I think it was the 3rd or 4th day. We were sitting there at circle time, and he's up there reading his book in the loft. And one of the kids said, "I'm going to be Batman when I grow up, because Batman could fly." Uh-oh. And Aiden just shouts from the other side of the room, "No!" And he runs down out of the loft. He gets about halfway across the room. He stops and says, "Batman doesn't fly. Batman drives a Batmobile and swings on ropes." And then the kids got into this debate about Batman's power. Yeah. Meanwhile, he gets closer and closer, and he finally sits with us because he realized I wasn't going to tell him what to do. He realized I was going to let him make his decision. And it took a few days, but we hit a topic that suddenly he goes, "Wait, that's important stuff going on over there. I want to be part of it." And that's how I know we're doing the right work, when the kids on their own are making their own decisions to be part of it, to be part of this community. Because ultimately, as Michael says, critical thinking, empathy, and knowing how to get to creating space for others to get their needs met. Those are the skills, baby. Yeah. If you want job skills, the job skills, look at any successful person in the world. There's 3 characteristics that are always true. They're self-motivated, they work well with others, and they are personable. Those are the 3 skills of success. And I'm not talking about just financial success. I'm talking about, having good relationships, having doing satisfying work in your life, these kind of, having enough money, better health outcomes. All of these things come from these 3 characteristics. And those are the ones we learn through play and through self-directed learning. Yeah,
for sure. Cooperative play and parallel play, side-by-side play, all those types of plays as they progress through. One thing you were talking about was the ability to think and respond, right? Like, it's time to go. And then they think about it and they can respond to it, right? That's a huge skill. Another one that I talk about a lot, or when I do trainings and education stuff, is the ability to identify and validate their own emotions, which I think is also part of, the ability to think and respond, because then they're thinking through, all these different pieces, and then being able to feel the way that they're feeling. And we often downplay that in young learners, just in a fun way. And so one kind of controversial thing that I bring up, I do this training about what to say, what not to say to kids, and kind of bring up all of these statements that we just make all the time. And one of them is, "You get what you get and you don't throw a fit," which I mean, but it was widely used. I used it when I was first teaching, right? It was a whole thing. And so when I say that, these teachers are like, what? Like, I say that all the time. We're teaching them that to get, you be happy with what you have. And we're teaching them thankfulness. We're teaching them how to be grateful, even if they don't like it. We're teaching them these things. And I'm like, what if you were also maybe introducing to them that they did not know their own emotions and that they weren't allowed to be upset even if they felt upset, or they were less valuable upset than they were if they weren't upset? What if that was part of it? And these teachers are like, like, oh man, so we introduced some alternatives to that statement, but it's just in the little things that we do just throughout our day.
One of my first mentors, a woman named Chris David, who was my daughter's preschool teacher when I was a co-op parent and going to school and learning from her. I remember she had a box of scarves that we used for different songs and things like that at circle time, and they were all different colors. And I'll never forget, there was like first day of class, and this one boy just, it was horrible for him that he didn't get the color he wanted.
Yes,
and he just threw himself on the ground and he was crying and everything. And I remember Chris going over and talking to him and talking about, you're sad, you're disappointed, she validating his emotion and everything. But the next day, she did a little work with her third teacher, right? The environment.
Yeah.
And the next day, all the scarves were the same color.
Yeah.
Right. A lot of these things, it's our fault. It's our doing. We create an environment where it tells children to get upset about certain things. But you get what you get. That one is like, I throw a fit all the time when I don't get what I get. Think about when you order something on Amazon and they deliver the wrong thing.
Yeah,
right?
like
you get frustrated with people because they haven't done it. I mean, we should get what we want in life, or at least have a good reason why not. It shouldn't just be just, hey, come on, that's nothing to cry about.
Right, that's obedience. That's obedience. That's not like true gratefulness. And I asked the next question is, can they be both grateful that they got one of the things and upset that they didn't get the color that they wanted? Can they have a both and emotion? And they're like, well, I'm like, do you ever have a both and emotion? Are you thankful that your coffee made on time in the morning and annoyed that you burnt yourself when you drank it? Like, can you have a both and emotion? And these conversations of just like, oh man, because so often our practices, we just pick up from the teacher before us, or we heard it, or we do it, and we never really dig into it and say, why do we say that? What's the impact of what we say? Because often our intention is very different than the impact intent.
Well, I think a lot of the intention for a lot of these things, and I think this is what, to teach, especially elementary school teachers I know, they spend a lot of effort on classroom management. Yeah. And to me, that's what that's about. It's like, I don't have time to deal with your individual emotions.
I don't have time for that. So
help me out with it by letting me manage my classroom. And I think classroom management, that whole concept is alien to me. It drives me crazy because you're not there to manage the classroom. That's not your job. You're not there. You're there to support children as they learn. And part of how they learn, learning's messy. Learning is not tidy and clean, and it doesn't go in a straight line. And tears are part of learning. Being upset, our emotions are an important part of how we learn. It's how we lock a lot of information into our brain sometimes.
Yeah. So the feelings are for feeling kind of concept. And I think classroom management kind of squashes out. No, we don't do feeling. We don't have time for that. We have the next thing and the next thing, and this is coming, and like, just set it aside.
Well, we're really down on exuberance too, boy. Somebody gets really excited about some boy. We got keep it down.
Use your inside voice. Use your inside voice. Inside voice. That's important. Use your inside voice. Like, you can only be happy somewhere else.
Right.
So, I think, all right, to bring it all back around to full circle before we run out of our time here, I feel we could just sit around and talk about this for, forever and ever. But it was back to why we're not preparing learners for the jobs of tomorrow. And you gave some really good points in there. And I'm going to see if I can get them all right. Like, one, we don't know the jobs of tomorrow. Right?
Well, it's right. And why should we prepare? Is it really our job to get them ready for the economy?
Right. If Google wants more workers, Google can train them.
Let Google train their workers, man.
Yeah. Gosh. Oh my gosh. Okay, I forgot the other two.
Well, because we're a democratic society.
Yes.
And, because the skills required, because we're educating citizens. That's the purpose. I mean, that's what our founders did, didn't they? As soon as they signed the Constitution, they started founding schools because they knew the project of self-governance required an educated population. That is the purpose of public education, not vocational training.
Yeah. That's like a truth bomb right there. That's what doesn't make you any friends.
Well, if people want their kids to get good jobs, I get it, right? But you know what? I'd rather have my kid get a job that she loves.
I'd rather have my kid create a job that she loves, right?
Job. Exactly. To spend your time, because we spend a lot of time at our work. We spend a lot of time at school, and to just be there grind. I always say, why are we pre-grinding their noses? It's,
it's a valid question.
The world is hard enough, right? We don't need to grind them down and make them feel a little less bad about life and a little less bad about themselves, so that when they get out in the real world, then when the world is hard on them, that somehow they're used to it.
Yeah.
I don't want my kid be, come on, man, this isn't fair, and push back.
Yeah. Yeah. Seriously. And be able to respectfully challenge, the other person, the other party, or have those types of conversations. I think that's huge. And if we had just like a little bit more of that in the world right now, think of how things would be going just a little bit differently.
Well, I think that whole idea of standing up for your own beliefs and listening to others as they stand up for theirs. We're having all these debates around the pandemic right now, around how we should be behaving. And you know what? I don't think either side's listening to the other side.
No.
We all think we know what the other side's saying.
Yeah.
But you know what? None of us want to get sick. Nobody wants to get sick. We all want. True. We all want to. We don't want the kids getting sick. We all have this. But we can't. We're not going to persuade anybody. We need to understand each other.
Yeah. Yeah. The ability, and I think it all wrapped up in that too, is the ability for someone to have a different belief or understanding than you, and for you not to feel like you have to fix them, and for you also to feel that still value them as a human instead of less than.
Especially when that person's a child. And I think this is one of the things I think about a lot, because they are people. They're citizens as well.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
They're citizens as well. And and they're citizens with very few rights. Yeah. Right? They don't get to vote. They can't go get a job. They have to live where they're told to live. They have to, they don't have most of the freedoms we have. They don't even really have freedom of speech most of the time.
Right. Oh, yeah, for sure.
And so
for sure.
They're counting on us. They're counting on us to take care of them and to stand up for their rights. Now, back in, a century and a half ago, women wouldn't, men kept saying, we'll take care of your rights. Don't worry, you little women. And women didn't take that, right?
Just pat you on the head and you'll be fine.
We did the same thing, about in slavery. We kind of said, we'll take care of them. We'll take care of them. And of course, no, civil rights and everything else told us, no, we're not going to let you, we don't trust you to do that. It's not till we have the full access to citizenship. So that worries me, right? That we're sitting here in this purported democratic society, and we think we get to tell kids what to do all the time. And you know what? I can't do it. And I'm not going to.
Yeah. Yeah. How are we? And that's something that I bring up a lot when I do these trainings again, is because I'm always asking these questions, just like, let me throw a question out there and see how you feel about this. And, what if you said this to a child, or is this something you typically say to a child? And it's usually like a command or a demand or, or a correction, like, oh, you're fine. You're fine. Everything's fine. Like, don't worry about it. You're fine. Is that something you would also say to a coworker?
Yeah.
And they're like, well, no, I wouldn't. No. I'm like, okay, well, why? Well, because the coworker, gets a say in what they're doing.
Yeah.
Oh, so the child has no say in what they're doing. Well, no. Okay. And so, when we talk about what you're instilling, if you're telling them they have no say over themselves, over their body, over their thoughts, and then suddenly you put them out in a world and say, keep yourself safe. And now we've gotten to this point of what is consent? And I didn't know that was a thing. And all of that, just think of the things that we're
the way
instilling.
children learn to be respectful. You've mentioned that a couple of times, and obviously some members of your audience value children being respectful, and I value children being respectful. The way I teach it is by being respectful to them.
Modeling it.
That is the only way anybody learns respect. You can't command somebody into respect. You can make them afraid.
Yeah.
You can make them obedient. You can make them timid. You can make them, just like, but you can't. They won't learn how to be respectful. But if they see that you're treating them respectfully, if you're listening to what they have to say, if you're considering what their point of view, then they'll start considering your point of view, and they learn it from us. Most of what they learn from adults, most of what they learn is by just looking at us and say, because they know when we're full of it. Basically, when we say, don't eat ice cream because it's bad for you. They all know that parents are eating ice cream at night. I mean, the kids, and we joke about it all the time at school. I tell the kids, I said, you know what the best part about being a grown-up is? I get to eat ice cream anytime I want.
Oh, ice cream.
And they're just my parents do that. They eat it when I go to bed.
I know. I mean, the best and most concerning thing about being an adult is I'm like consistently unsupervised. So, I mean, I just get cake at any point that I feel like I should have cake. I mean, But
I always tell them the consequence, of course, is that, kids grow up and down. Grown-ups grow side to side.
That's true.
And that's when they have to be careful.
That's true. Yeah, that's absolutely accurate. We're back to the critical thinking.
Yeah.
Think through your decisions. Well, I have loved this conversation. I feel like there's so many other fun avenues that we could go down, but this has been a cool one because I think this whole thing about why we're not preparing learners for the jobs of tomorrow, and then you kind of walk that back to what are the jobs of tomorrow, and then what are we preparing learners for if not the jobs of tomorrow, and how are we preparing them? And that brings us to the whole critical thinking and empathy and flexibility and responsibility and respect and just all those beautiful things.
You asked these questions, provocative questions. I have this question I ask people all the time. I love this one. What if this entire generation of children decided when they grew up they're going to be dancers? That's what they all decided to do, every one of them.
Yeah.
Our whole world would have to transform to fit those dancers. The entire economy would become based on dance. So it is possible. We don't have to all go work at Amazon or Google or at an assembly line. Right. You know what I mean? That's how much power we have as citizens. If we all decided we wanted to dance all the time, every day, the economy would grow around us. And so I say I don't mind teaching kids that it's okay to choose to be a dancer or a ballerina or a cowboy or a princess.
Right. Yeah. Life's more fun that way anyway.
Life would be a blast if everybody was a princess.
For sure. For sure. No, I love that question. I think that's a perfect place to kind of end this is like, think about that. Like, what are the consequences of this?
Can I just promote myself just a little bit?
Oh, for sure. Yes, please.
So my blog is called Teacher Tom's Blog, and you can just Google that and find it. I've got 2 books, Teacher Tom's first book and Teacher Tom's second book. And you can find that by going, I've got a website, it's teachertomsworld.com. And then we talked a little bit about, the commands and speaking, how we speak with children. Yeah. I have an e-course called The Technology of Speaking with Children So They Can Think. And it's and I'm just going to say it's courses.teachertomsworld.com, and you can find that. And that's just where we really take a deep dive in the way we speak with children and how we create kind of a reality we don't want to with our language and how we can do it.
Language is huge. It's a huge thing. And then you're also on LinkedIn.
I'm on
That's
LinkedIn.
Where I found you.
I'm on Facebook.
Where else are you?
I'm on Instagram. I'm on Twitter. Those are the only ones I know. I'm sure there's other ones, but those are the ones I do.
But you're not Teacher Tom. You're Thomas Hobson.
Yeah.
Right.
On LinkedIn, I'm Thomas Hobson.
Okay.
Because that's where I put my resume. I had to be kind of like, formal, right?
No fun.
LinkedIn is the business guy place to go. It's anyway.
We're trying to burn that down, so that's fine.
Okay, well, it's fine with me. I'll just show up. If you let me post my picture in my blog post, I'll show up there and do it.
Right? Yeah. Well, thank you so much for hanging out, y'all. If you haven't connected with Tom so far, go ahead and find him. Check out his courses, his books. Lots of great conversation around there, and just think a little bit deeper about the words that you're saying, and what we are actually preparing kiddos for, and what is the purpose of the education that we're providing. So just take those thoughts with you as you go through your week. I will see you all next week on What Could Go Wrong Live. Same time, same place, except maybe LinkedIn will be happier with me next week and we'll be there too. So